Welcome to Walker Tea Review. I'm Jason Walker. We're coming to the beginning of a new year, and I'm always looking for new teas. This was actually a new tea company for me that recently contacted me and sent me a sample. So let's go ahead and talk about this Tieguanin that I've got here in front of me. And to do so, we'll be using some traditional Chinese-style preparation equipment here. For example, this is the Chinese gaiwan, which has a lid, a bowl, and a saucer. Something to consider for the year if you're looking to get into teas this year, or I should say, get more into teas for the next year. This is useful for several reasons. One, there's a kind of charm, a kind of elegance to being able to use a gaiwan properly. Two, it's fairly simple to use. It can be used both for sharing or for group, pouring, by pouring like so, or you can simply use it for personal by just simply pushing the lid away and straining the leaves as you sip directly from the bowl. So let's go ahead and get this started. Now this is a lighter roasted Tieguanin, or Iron Goddess of Mercy, or Tieguanin, depending on the spelling or the pronunciation that you may be more familiar with. I'm going to use, well, let me back up and say, first off, you have the outer packaging, and again, this was vacuum sealed, so it was actually pressed up against the leaves fairly tightly. You can actually still see the wrinkles where it was sucked, the air was sucked out in there. Now, on the inside was another layer with the plastic wrapping. I had to cut that open. And now we've got our leaf here, so let's go ahead and get out a little bit of this leaf. Now, for my bowl here, I do want to kind of cover the bottom, inch diameter of the bottom there, 1.5 inches, somewhere in there. I'm going to set this back in here for just a moment so that I can pour my water. Water's been brought to a pretty early boil, so that it bubbles but hasn't gotten to a rolling boil. Been cooling for over a minute and a couple of minutes now, but still plenty warm enough to get these leaves to react. I find with a lighter roasted Tieguanin like this one, cooler temperatures can be a little better suited for them as opposed to a fully heavier, full rolling boil. Now I've got enough water so that it rose above the rim of my lid, creating a kind of seal there, which is good. So I'm going to set that aside and talk a little bit about this tea. This tea is from the MingShan Tea Company. This is their Dancing Flower Light Roast Tieguanin. You can find 3 ounces available for $20, and that comes in a tin, and that 3 ounces comes separately wrapped so it stays a little fresher in 12 bags like this. So you get one bag, is roughly a serving, and you can often get, again, with Tieguanins and a lot of loose leaf teas, you're getting more than one steeping from those. So don't think this is a one-time use and throw it away. You'll get multiple steepings, and generally, I find the first steeping is not always the strongest or the fullest flavor profile. So you do want to kind of get tastings and experiences off camera, or at least more than just one that initial tasting. This is from Fujian province, from Anxi, the Anxi area. So that's an indication that it's coming from the historic traditional origin of this tea. Now, let's talk a little bit about this tea leaf for just a moment. I want to talk a little bit about the dry leaf, the wet leaf, and the liquor. We'll talk about those as we go along. First thing you want to do, when you go through a tea tasting, you do want to make notes, especially if you're newer to teas, because there are so many and it can get confusing after a while. So initial basic notes about aromas, tastes, flavors, textures, those things are helpful. Colors. So, for example, I'm getting a lot of floral component off of this. It's getting an orchid type note, a little bit of a lilac type aspect as well. Looking at these leaves, They've got some good color to them, got some brightness about them. They are a deeper, richer blue-green in color, and then moving over towards, again, kind of a yellowish green. Now these portions are a little bit smaller than, say, a Taiwanese oolong. This roll has got more than one leaf balled together. A lot of these look like one leaf, possibly two leaves in some of the larger cases. But a lot of these are, at least this particular handful, not as many of the larger multi-leaf ball size there. Let me put these back in so we can move on, talk a little bit about the wet leaf. We have to, and give this a pour. As far as the gloss, it's got a good shine, it's got a good brightness to it. Not a lot of sheen or shine to these, but I find that's you see a lot more sheen or shine, gloss on a darker, more roasted oolong. It seems to be that the heat, the roasting, draws out more of the oils to the surface of the leaf. So, got out my my pitcher here. I'm going to serve and pour into that. I'm going to take my index finger, hold my lid. My other finger is going to hold the bowl here. Pour that right in. And see, when it's done well, it takes a little bit of practice. If it's done well, you don't scald your hands on the bowl because you're touching the rim that's cooler. And you're not losing a lot you're not dripping a lot over the side. You get a nice, smooth, even pour. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about, although that liquor looks very nice, let's go ahead and talk about our wet leaf first. I'm going to get a few nice smells. And if you want to pause and make your notes, before you hear my comments, do so, but do it quickly so that it doesn't cool off your liquor, for example, for too long. Okay. Because it's a lighter green, I detect more things like a kind of a lima bean. It's got a fresh lima bean. It's got some sweetness to it. It's got some beaniness to it still. Still has some green aspect to it. If there were any floral aspect, there is a little bit more of a, again, kind of a hyacinth type sweetness in the back. That adds some sweet floral fragrance to this. But let's go ahead and look at our leaves. Leaves, I find, with a lot of these types of Tiaguanins, lighter roasted, you get portions like this, fairly ragged along the edge. And it's my understanding, I haven't confirmed this, I'm getting some initial, I should say, I get some initial feedback from producers and others in the tea industry that the reason you have jagged edges like that on the leaf are because those edges dried out more, or they were more oxidized, and sometimes these leaves are actually shaken to break off those more drier, more oxidized, brittle parts, because if they were left on, they would affect the greener floral taste and aromas of this tea. So they try to kind of shake those, work those more aged sections off. The other thing is tenderness of the leaf. Like, for example, this one's very soft, very supple. This one is a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier feeling. It hasn't fully unfurled, which is a positive note for subsequent steepings, meaning there's more to release in that leaf. Here's another leaf that hasn't fully unfurled, so that's a positive note. This one's still one of the more tightly wound leaf sets that I've gotten in quite a while. I'm going to actually put one of these back to show how tightly wound. I think that's a good example of one that's still fairly well balled and rolled up. Not a lot of sets. I'm not seeing indication of many leaf sets or pairs. Here's a little bit of a leaf that has a little bit, some stem just below the leaf, still connected. But for the most part, leaf portions or very large leaves that have been rolled and tightly tucked together. tucked into a ball. Now let's move on then and talk some more about our liquor here. First off, really bright, clear, good color there. It's a yellow color. It's lightly pale. You do see some particulates, very fine looking particulates floating around in there. Good clarity as you look down through it as well. Still those lima bean, fresh green lima bean type notes, combined with a little bit of hyacinth in there. Let's give it a pour and a taste here. Swirl it around a little bit. Now, again, you're getting more of that kind of beany type, sweet beany note there, characteristic of this kind of lightly roasted tea. It's not overly floral, so it doesn't feel, again, the danger with a lot of Taiwanese lighter roasted like this, and even some of your lighter roasted Taiwanese type teas, is that it becomes overly perfumey, like flowers getting shoved up your nose. This one is milder. This one's gentler. There is a very light brothiness that comes over the mouth, so that balances well with the lightness of the floral component. So you are getting some of that beany, that lima bean component there, fresh lima bean, combined with a little bit of that lilac or hyacinth working in the back. The aftertaste and the feel, you do start to get kind of a powdery, kind of light powdery dryness underneath the front and sides of your tongue, and it wraps around a little bit towards the edge and then over to the top of the tongue. So that gives it a kind of makes your tongue lightly, faintly tingle, makes it more kind of alert and aware of what's happening in your mouth. You become aware of the sweetness that's happening, that's kind of pooling in the back of the mouth. It's a green vegetable type of sweetness that you've just eaten some fresh, sweet greens. So that's there, and that's a positive note. The aftertaste kind of centers around that sweetness there. It carries on. Again, it's light, it's not intense, but it is sustained. It's still going on right now. Now, having let this cool a little bit, just to kind of give it a note to see if if any of those notes have built or diminished. Yeah, as it cools, it becomes a little milder in the astringency. The broth, the texture tends to even out things, and so the flow, the effect, the feel of the mouth, the aromas, the texture, they just tend to kind of round out, especially as it cools. So, looking at this tea as a whole, this, I would say, this is probably one of these. This is a fairly strong one. I'll go ahead and say it that way. This one, I would give it, probably give this one a 92. I think it's got a good rounded, it's got a good balance in its characteristics. It's not overly, like I said, not overly perfumey. Got a good texture to it. An aftertaste that really kind of extends and builds on what's there without overdoing it. So come back to Walker Tea Review, where we look at new teas like this, teas that you will want to consider, and teas that you want to understand more about, especially in the coming year.